Who else is you were open for a holiday?
All right, so theoretically, we now have a YouTube channel, so we can go back and look at whatever shows we've put on, whatever presentations. So hopefully this works. It's not very refined yet because I literally am just trying to figure this stuff out. If any of you have teenage children who would be better at this, you can ask them and I can get tips, but we'll start it either way. First things first, introducing new people and guests. If you're new, go ahead and raise your hand and introduce yourself. See, half the room. We're growing. We can start in the back if you would.
Scott Greenlee from Mentor.
Good to see you.
Bruce Nielsen from North Perry.
Terry from Thompson.
Awesome.
I know, right?
Kim, Jay, and Steve from Batesville and Hampton.
Very cool. Very cool. Oops. Thank you. I know when this cold is couldn't have been that much fun.
I got one more box number. I don't know if you want them all.
It might be easiest.
Bring them all in?
Yeah, it might be easiest. I need to make you go back out.
That's right. I do. It's really heavy. You have two people in the front?
Yes. Yeah, you're not getting out of being introduced. Go ahead and introduce yourselves.
From Madison.
It was a good try, though. And this is Peggy Garnes. She'll be our speaker tonight.
Just turning off my cell phone.
It's all good. She is the vice president of the Ohio State Beekeeping Association, as well as a past president of Medina,
Yes.
as well as one of the founders of the Ohio Queen Breeding Project.
Yes.
And I know you have a lot of other things that go after that. But at some point, yeah, those are the big ones. She's been a speaker for a long time, so this should be a very good talk. But we'll do a quick meeting before. Hold on. Here, handle my vice president. That's the fun with the internet. I'm sure you can see me and he's asking what I'm doing. No. Can we have a quick secretary's report?
He's not getting anything.
He's not getting anything.
Like no picture or no sound. It hasn't begun.
Interesting.
We'll try to.
And I will be no help with this because my son went to college and then moved. And so I'm stuck in the water.
It says live.
It says live right now.
Work, I'm screwed.
2 viewers.
Yeah.
I think it's on his end.
Yeah.
We'll try this later if nothing else.
Yeah. Everything looks good on our end. Sorry.
Quick secretary's report.
Well, I distributed the minutes for the 11:20 meeting
I know, it's the best way to do it.
and the trustee meeting we did at Victor Square. I put the notes on the other side of the figure. So you have all the information for those 2 meetings.
And I move to table that. We can address it next meeting. Any other details, just because we have a speaker? Is there a second? All in favor, signify by the sign of aye. All right. I also move that we table the treasurer's report. Same reason.
Treasurer's not here.
Exactly. We'll make things quicker. So unfortunately, we had one of the first casualties of beekeeping for the season. So Mary was kind enough to bring in the dead out so we can look at it and do a quick autopsy later. Unfortunately, autopsies are one of the things that you actually learn the most from because you learn what you did wrong or whether you just had bad luck because it's not always you. First year, it could be you, but it could just be bad luck. This is an exceptionally cold year, and certain areas that haven't been cold historically have been cold now this year, far colder than what anybody was expecting. Out on the farm, we got to -15 at one point. That's bad. Now, it's not really a problem for me because all my bees are in Florida, but I don't know if I would have had much luck overwintering anything in -15. That's just, it's simply too cold And I know I don't usually wrap them as tight as you would need to survive that, especially since that's a little bit more of a windy area. You'd really need to take some precautions if you've got any kind of wind in that cold. So, all right, moving along. Old business, the potluck. How did it go? Was it good? We'll go ahead and plan on doing another one of those in the spring. I think that from everything I've heard from everybody, that worked out pretty well. I like potlucks. And I'm pretty much going to suspend any of the old business. And I'm pretty much just going to, like I said, run through this because we have a speaker and I'd rather she talks. Like I said, I wanted to give you the most amount of time that you could need. So with no further ado, we have Peggy Garnes. Yep, that's all I'm doing.
That was very efficient.
Right? I don't have a lot to say as far as the meeting. It's winter. There's not a lot of beekeeping.
As Dan said, Peggy Garnes, and I'm going to try and not walk too much in front. I tend to wander, so I think I'll wander this way. Because you want most
Stay out this way.
Okay, or I'll go that way.
I was going to say, stay out this way.
I've been a beekeeper for almost 20 years. I run a little over 100 hives and about 60 mating units during the summer. So they're kind of like very busy. This is like almost a full-time kind of job. The remark that Dan made about that it's -15 is too cold, not really. The chickens came out at like -4 and they were out walking around.
Depends.
We did candy brick making at the house yesterday. I have like twice a winter, people can come to the house and we'll do that Danny Slaba's recipe where you boil the sugar water and add Honey Bee Healthy and all that other kind of good stuff, and then quick get it into pans before it turns into a rock. And then we went out to go put it on a couple hives. And when we opened them up, I figured we just quick stick them in there. No, the bees were up there and moving. And it was, I think it was like 10 degrees yesterday. So the bees adjust. It's us that has the perception of it's too cold. It's not them. Okay, so tonight's talk is about the Apiary Diagnostic Kit from the Ohio State Beekeepers. There were about 6 or 7 of us that worked pretty hard on this project to bring it to where it is. There are still kits that are available for new people. They're free. If you take the class, if you register with the state, you buy bees, you buy equipment, you go online and register, and they'll send you a kit to you. And that's what we're going to talk about. It was from the grant, the specialty crop grant, and the 4 that were awarded to all the applicants, we were one of the 4, and we were the only beekeeping association. The other 3 were universities. So it was like a big kudos that we really worked hard enough to get this. Why they want me to slide in there, you already know who I am, you know who you are, and we know what today is. My favorite quote, though, is, so how do you know what you don't know until you don't know? Which we'll probably get to that with Mary at the end of this. But a lot of times, especially for new folks, you don't know that there's a problem until it's kind of too late to know. So this is a good time of the year for this. So what does this little splatter on the front of the hive mean? Is it nosema, or it's just they've had such a long time that they've been stuck in the hive and haven't been able to get out for a flood? When you've got pollen coming in, this time of the year, where the heck are they getting pollen? And is that a good sign in January? Probably not. You don't want them brooding up this early. So again, so how do you know what you don't know? This is a picture of part of one of my bee yards. Those are 3 Russian hives. The queens came from Carl Webb, so they were pure Russians, same age, same genetic, started the same day. Now, if you only had 1 hive and you were a new person, this looks okay. 2 deeps, honey super,
Brick in the middle, that's my secret. That means it's queen right and everything's cooking good. This one is the one, of course, we all want to have, right? The 2 deeps, 3 honey supers, cranking gangbusters. But what happened to this one? That they were all started on the same day. If you notice, this brick is standing straight up. That's a problem. Plus, if you look real closely, there's newspaper there. So this is one that was combined. So if you were not in there monitoring, preferably for new people weekly, is what I suggest. But for someone who has been keeping bees for a while, if you go in like every couple weeks. But if you weren't going in, how would you know this little hive was in trouble, that it had to be combined, and that you needed to be checking it? Again, so how do you know what you don't know? When Bee Informed Partnerships started tracking winter losses, they were blaming a lot of it on mites, people not treating for them, people not monitoring, watching the buildup of the mites with the buildup of the bees. Now that they're checking it, they're also finding that we are getting more summer loss than winter loss. How many people in here participate in the Bee Informed Partnership surveys? It's an online, just stand. Next time when I come visit, lots of little hands. Takes you maybe 5 minutes to fill out the survey. It doesn't matter if you have 1 hive or 50 or 100. Doesn't matter. Fill it out. It's confidential. They will track it by area. And that's about it. But it is good. The more knowledge that we have coming in, the more data we have coming in, the more we can find trends. Up in your area, I would think the big deterrent is the snow. Maybe not so much the temperature, but the snow that you can't get back out and check those hives at all. So monitoring for sustainability, what does it mean? We're going to talk about each one of these. If you haven't met the state apiist, that's Barb Bletcher there. When she comes out to inspect me, she brings like this whole little kit, and they're there for probably about 6 hours that day. She brings friends because it's going to take a while. So what does it mean? Why should you do it? How do you do it? What do you need to use? And how often should you be doing it? This is one of the pages out of the manual. And with that, you're going to have parts in it where you can put the date. Designate 2 colonies. Does everybody have at least 2 colonies? Anybody have less than that? Not you, Mary. We got 1 year here. At least take 2, number them. And then you're going to check all these different things. And you have a space for notes. We're going to pull this open. We're going to pull the kit out in just a second. So what we want to do is why we should do it, because this is what, again, this is what we want. This is one of my friend's hives, 2 deeps, queen excluder, honey super, honey super, honey super, honey super. That's what you want. You don't want this mess. This was one of the hives in the Medina Club's bee yard that, that's a nasty mess. That was taken, I think, in February, 2 years ago. So that's what you don't want. So for that, why, when we go talk about why, how, all these kind of fun things is we're going to talk about doing a sugar roll, doing drone comb or checking drones for the mites in them. Notice that they're very colorful. A lot of people say, well, I won't be able to see them. Oh, yeah, you will. They're very colorful. Or you can check a sticky board. Sticky board is not going to be really accurate, but if you bring me a board that looks like that, you have a problem. A big problem. All these little orange round spots, like that one, that one, that one, those are all mites that fell down. That's huge. Yes, sir.
Are those dots in the little picture there?
That's a mite.
Okay.
And that's it's a pretty accurate size. And if you have good, healthy larvae, it's very white. It's like a pearly white. So that reddish brown little mite is going to show up really good. There'll be no mistaking it. Again, this is just the 300 angry white bees that have been powdered sugar. So what we're going to do is we're going to hold on right there. and open up the box.
That's right up top.
Okay. So when you get the kit, or when you look at these kits, they come in this box, they ship it right to your house. Looks like that, so you know what's coming. You get a 5-gallon bucket and the lid. The lid's important. Don't do like me and trash them, because you're gonna need it, and I'm gonna tell you why in a minute. The manual that comes in here. It's got all this stuff pretty much that we're gonna talk about on the screen today. The best part though is this part in the middle where you can actually make records of what you're looking at when you go in your hive, and that at the end of 5 weeks, you can see what has happened in those 2 hives for 5 weeks. That's huge. So that if you're looking at it and you're marking in there how many, if there were eggs and larvae, and you see it growing and growing and growing, and when you did your sugar roll, you found 1 mite the first time, the next week you found 2 mites, the next week you found 4 mites, and then by the 4th week, all heck was breaking loose and there were like 15. You have a big problem, but you can see this, and next year when you sit down and look at your notes, you know when you really need to be paying attention. Does that make sense? You gotta take notes. How many people take notes? Oh, come on, guys. Okay, in it, you also get coffee filters, which is, you're gonna use that for your mite counts. You have to supply alcohol. You'll have to supply the alcohol. Of course, you're gonna bring water to the bee yard, 1, because you're supposed to be hydrating when you're out there. That's not in the talk, but you really should have it. Plus, you're gonna need it to melt the powdered sugar. And you're going to need to supply some powdered sugar from a house. I highly suggest that you take a small bag and you designate it for the bee yard. Spouses tend to frown that when you go in the house with your hive tool and you stick it in the powdered sugar bag, throw some in your baggie, and scoot back out of the house and then stick the bag back in the cupboard. Trust me, it doesn't go well. Have your own little bag. You're going to get a container with a lid and screening in it, and that's what you're going to put your bees in, to powder sugar. When you go to collect your bees, you also have a 1/2 cup scoop. So when you take your frame out of the hive, you're going to take it out of the hive, and most of the time when you guys think about getting bees out, you think about scraping the bees down, right? A little trick, turn the frame sideways and go down the frame. The bees will just fall right into the cup. A lot of times you think you have to scrape them off. All you're gonna do is aggravate them. But just run the cup down the side and they will fall into the cup. Makes it a whole lot easier. Take your 1/2 cup of bees, you're gonna put them in your cup. Tap them down a little bit on the container, put the lid on, just so they don't get out. Take your powdered sugar. I usually just use the end of my hive tool, and 2 scoops is about 2 tablespoons-ish. Put it on the screen, rub it a little bit, it falls in. Now you've got a container of 300 lightly powdered bees. You're gonna roll them. I know when we get to this part, it's gonna say shake them. You don't wanna shake them, because it makes them kind of dizzy and they throw up. And when they vomit, the honey nectar stuff sticks on the side of the jar. All right, so the mites get stuck on the side of the jar. You don't want that. You want the mites to be falling off into the powdered sugar. So you're gonna roll them for about 1 minute, 2 minutes. All right, and then you're just gonna set them off, preferably in the sun, for about another 3 minutes. What happens now that they're lightly rolled in powdered sugar? They're annoyed, so they're gonna start heating up. Sitting in the sun, they're gonna heat up even more. As they heat up, all the segments underneath them are gonna open up more,
So they're gonna get more powdered sugar in there, and that's where most of the mites are. A lot of times as new beekeepers, we think that if we look at the bees, that we can see mites. No. If you look at the top of the bees, and if you see a mite, you're seeing less than 5% of that problem. They're all underneath them. And how many people, honestly, when you go in to check for mites, do you roll your bees over and check in the segments? Probably not, right? Okay, so after you've getting done letting these guys sit for about 3 to 5 minutes, now they're humming pretty good. So now you're gonna roll them a little bit more aggressively. Not shaking them, but you're gonna roll them a little bit more aggressively. Then what you're going to do is you're gonna take your lid, coffee filter, and you're gonna shake all the powdered sugar out of them, all right? And then after you think you've shaken it all out, then you're gonna shake them a little bit harder. Then you're gonna shake out the rest of it. Set the bees to the side because we're not done with them yet. You're gonna take your water and you're gonna pour some on it. And what happens when you add water to powdered sugar? It melts it, right? So instead of having a white pile of dust here, now you have a soggy coffee filter, but you can actually see the mites. Okay, does that make sense? If you find like you have 1 or 2 mites here and you're thinking, well, that's not so bad. Remember we said we're not done with those bees yet? At least 2 to 3 times a season. I usually tell people like in June, again at the end of July, and at the end of August. You're gonna do, when you do your sugar roll, you are then gonna take your alcohol. You've already caught your 300 bees, correct? You already did your sugar dump out on the coffee filter, melted it down, and got what you thought was the mite count from the bees. So now you're gonna take your alcohol, pour it in on top of those 300 bees, and swish it around. You can swish it pretty good. Remember, it's a screen top, so don't go like that. Swish it around real good, and you'll be able to see everybody swimming around. I would probably say fill it at least halfway full. If you go to like Walmart or Kmart, a large bottle of this size is about 99 cents. It's not expensive. At least halfway to 3/4 the way full. Swish it around again. Take yourself a new coffee filter, all right? Because this was the first one, right, that we found 1 or 2 mites on. So that's the powdered sugar count. Now you have the same bees with alcohol, and you're gonna dump those out now. Pour that onto there. It's gonna be a little bit more messier that second time. And then count these up. I will guarantee you are gonna get more mites, all right? Add this alcohol one to the powdered sugar one. That is your true mite drop. All right, does that make sense? Right.
Why are you mixing them with powdered sugar and syrup? You're just wasting a lot of time.
That's true, but a lot of times as new people, they don't want to kill the bees, especially if you have a light package. Say you have a package that came in and it was a little bit light of 3 pounds. Yeah, maybe you don't want to kill off 300 of them right away. The main thing though is that you want to understand that if you take the powdered sugar count and the alcohol count, that is your true count. So if you had 2 here and maybe 3 to 5 more in the alcohol wash, you'll be surprised how many more come up. The next time you get 2 here, you know in the back of your mind, you're really looking 7, 8. Does that make sense? So if you don't want to kill them by doing the alcohol wash, you can do the powdered sugar, that's okay. Just keep in mind an alcohol wash is quicker. It's a lot more accurate, but the end result is not good for them. You know, it's going to kill them, but it's going to give you a very accurate count. And you do need to do that at least 2-3 times a season.
You save yourself a heck of a lot of time. Forget about the powder, the filter, and the white lid. Shake them into a Cool Whip container.
That'll work too.
Works great.
That'll work too. We didn't put a Cool Whip container in here. You should have told me.
Any day, the powder, the coffee filter is going to blow away so you get to shake it.
Yeah. So far, I haven't had that problem yet. But does that make sense though? If you don't want to kill the bees, a lot of new people don't want to.
do the powdered sugar shake. But understand that's not going to be a true count. At least 3 times a season, do the alcohol one. You've already caught the 300 bees. Plus, the more that you handle them, the more likely, the more comfortable you're going to be in the hive. All right? Okay, so moving on. You also get this little handy dandy, like little lens. Be looking at comb. What else do we have in here? You get a flashlight so that when you're looking in the comb down at an angle, it's easier to see eggs and larvae. You also get another one that is a blue light. Oh, I wore the right clothes this time. This is very cool. This is something that I didn't know, and I don't know if you guys knew that up on top, that American foul brood will glow under fluorescent light. I didn't know that. I just found that out like a couple years ago. So we included a fluorescent light for you to check for glowing. If it is glowing, then you should take a sample, send it to Beltsville, call your county inspector, they'll give you a hand with it. Because that's like really, really important. When we talk about foul brood, I am adamant, burn it. But we'll get to that part. Roy?
What do you mean? What stage is foul brood glowing?
The scale. The scale will glow. The other handy thing is if you have a puppy or kitten, you can check for pee spots on the carpet. So multifunctional here, and you're not recording that part, right?
Oh, no, it's
you
on.
did record that. Oh, darn. One of the things also that you're going to get in your kit is a drone frame. A lot of times people that don't want to use chemicals want to do drone trapping. And what you're going to do is you're going to put this inside your hive. Doesn't matter whether you're running mediums or deeps. If you are running mediums, obviously this is perfect size. If you are running deeps, it's still a perfect size because what are they going to build on the bottom? Natural drone comb. Okay, so that makes it easy. What you're going to do is you're going to place this frame, just one frame outside the cluster. All right, remember when you took your beginner beekeeping class, where are drones raised? On the peripheral of the cluster, on the cooler parts. So one frame out from the cluster. The downside to this is that this is time specific because drones hatch how many days? 26, 24, 26, depending on time. These need to be pulled out every 3 weeks. You can pull them out as soon as they're capped. That's fine, but you cannot leave them past hatching time because what happens? Not only do you have a fresh crop of drones coming out, but you also have a nice, huge population of mites. And the whole point of this is to get rid of them, not to create more. So if you are not a time-sensitive person, this isn't going to be a good fit for you. I run these. I put them in every Sunday. I usually start down by me about middle of March. Probably up here, it wouldn't be till end of March before you could get in your hives. I put them one frame outside the cluster on a Sunday on the left side. The next week, on the next Sunday, I go in, I put another one in on the right side, one frame in from the cluster. Week 3, what am I doing? I'm taking out the first one I put in on the left, right? It's easy to remember that way for me. Pick a day that's easy for you. Don't make your life harder because then you're not going to do it. If you put it in on Tuesday and then, gee, next week, I can't get back in the hives till Thursday or that weekend, that's going to throw you off, isn't it? So pick a day that's easy for you to get in and out. Don't make your life tough. When you go to pull this thing out after it's capped, you also get an uncapper. This is a deadly weapon. We send these with these cardboard things. Trust me, keep that on there because the day that you don't have it on there and you're in there digging around, you'll pull it out, but it's going to be like coming out like this. And these things are really super, super sharp. So you're going to take your uncapper and you're gonna come in at an angle, right below the caps, and pull it straight up so that you're getting the cap and the larva, and it's gonna look just like that. And you can either scrape it off onto the top of the lid or on a paper towel or your coffee filter, whatever. You're gonna be able to see how many are on there, on each one. For me, if I fork and pull one out and I have one mite, I've just pulled the whole frame out. It goes in the freezer for 3 days. I mean, you can go through and fork the whole side and count, fork the other side and count, and see how many you actually have. But really, again, like Roy said, that would waste a lot of time. If you find one, you know there's going to be more. Pull the whole stinker out. Put a new one in, and then wait till the next week and pay a lot of attention and make sure you check that second frame. For me, if I fork one side and I don't find any, then I flip it over and fork the whole other side. So if you fork both sides of this, how many of you just checked? How many cells have you checked? What, right? About 5,000. If you don't find a mite on 5,000 larvae, you think you're pretty good for that week? I think so. That would be really good. If you find mites on one, you're going to put an X or somehow mark that hive, all right? Because you want to make sure that you pay attention next week and check that very closely. Does that make sense for you guys?
So if you find no mites, then you take the green frame out?
No. I think that you should run drone frame all summer. And that once a week, check one. Just because you want to be, we're trying to get the point of this, for you guys to monitor. If you are proactive, it's easier to stay ahead of the mites. If you are reactive and you wait until, say, June or July to put this in and you pull it out and there's 15, yikes. I mean, you got some problems, especially if you're in an area where there's a lot of where the drones wander from bee yard to bee yard. If they're carrying virus from, say my yard has virus, and those drones end up over at Dan's place and drop off some mites, Dan's not going to be happy.
Heck, would Mary.
Yeah, so be responsible. Okay, so I think run them all year. Plus it helps any breeding in your area because you're producing healthy drones. Yes.
If you have 2 deeps, are you putting that in the top or the bottom or both?
If you're running, the question is if you are running deeps. Week 1 is in the top deep, 1 frame in, because this time of year, where's the girls at? They're all moving up. So don't make your life hard. Use it top box. And if you can get rid of the mites coming out of winter, isn't that easier than waiting to let them all build up all summer and then try and get rid of them? So first thing, on the left, the second one, week 3, you're back over here again. Okay, so you're still working in that top box. All right, so you actually kind of need 3 of these at the end. Yes, sir.
Why did you put that affected mite in the freezer?
If you have mites, if you put it in the freezer for 3 days, that's going to kill everything. Of course, it's going to kill the larva, but it will also kill the mites. 24 hours, I have found it does not always freeze all the way in, and you want to make sure you're killing the mites. Some people feed the frames back to chickens, which is fine. I mean, they will eat the drones, the larva, and the mites. They'll eat the whole thing, but they also destroy the frame. I mean, they'll eat the wax. They just pick it down to the plastic.
Is it the idea to keep the wax?
Well, yeah, because isn't it a lot of work for the bees to make more wax? So if possible, you know, you want to try and save the wax.
That's the whole idea.
Correct. That's the whole idea. If you freeze it, let it thaw out for 24 hours and then give it back to the hive. Most of the bees nowadays are pretty hygienic. Within 24 hours, they're going to rip all those dead larvae out. You're going to see a ton of them out front, and they'll clean that up, but they will clean it all out. The frames are still intact then. They don't have to rebuild that wax. I saw him. Yes.
Now, that technique is only to identify your problem. It doesn't get rid of the problem, right?
If you are diligent enough, yes. Because if you start this in the spring and you catch the first group coming out of winter, so that one if you didn't find anything, I would still the next week keep checking. And we're going to talk about sticky board monitoring that also. If you find mites, so definitely that one goes in the freezer, a new one goes in, you put an X on that hive. The next week when you come through, you're pulling out the frame on the right, you are going to look at it very carefully. There should be a marketable number less than from frame 1. You should still find some. So that one goes in the freezer, put another one in. So then the third week, now we're on to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks. By this time, this should be clean, okay? And then if not, you got a big problem and you're gonna have to go probably some type of a soft chemical then to knock those down. But normally, for me at least, and I run 100 and I do a lot of data collection. Usually by the third time, they're clean. So by mid-April, I'm clean. Yes?
Isn't the part of the premise is that the drone cells are slightly larger or something, so that the mites tend to like those more, which they lay the eggs in those more often than the other hive?
The question is because the drone frames are larger, is that why the mites like them? Not really. The reason they like those better is because it's a longer development period. That female mite, when she goes in there, the first one she lays is a male. Then she lays females. If she's in there longer, she can lay a lot more females. So then thus keeping their species running longer.
So they tend to lay more eggs in those.
Correct. They can lay more mites because it's sealed longer.
So if they're laying in those frames, not your other frames, you're helping to kind of keep it restricted to the frame.
Correct, because that's what they prefer. Okay, we'll talk more about that. How many people mark queens? Oh, come on, you guys. This is way too much fun. You get a 2. They call it a plunger, marker. Practice on some drones. You can't mess up. Doesn't matter what color, it's a bright color in all the kits. The color is, there is a color for each year, which helps you to keep track of how old she is. But the main thing is that she's marked. If you know she's marked and you come in next time and there's not a marked queen in there, or the queen you find is running around with no spot, you know there was a problem. So it really doesn't matter what color. All right, so you're going to catch the queen. You can either pick her up by her wings and drop her in there and put the little tube in. You can find her on the frame that she's on, put the little tube above her, and be patient. She will eventually walk up. If you want to hurry things along, you can move it gently. Make sure you don't bump her or mess her feet up. As soon as she runs up the tube, you're going to slide the plunger up. All right? And notice my 2 fingers are holding the stick. So that as you depress her up there gently, so that the thorax is in one of those squares, you're going to take the cap off, mark her, and then as soon as you mark her, you're going to let that tube down just a little bit and hold it with your fingers again. All right, the reason you're doing that is that if she's pressed up there against the top of that hard plastic, you don't want to hurt her. Right? There's all those pheromones that she produces all over her body. So you don't want to pinch a foot. You don't want to mess up a little antennae, or you don't want to mess up someplace on her body that she's producing a pheromone. So ease it off a little bit so she can walk around and dry. I normally tell people then, once you've got her marked and you know you're good with that, put it down next to the hive in the shade, away from your feet, like next to the leg of the hive stand, next to a box that you know you're not going to be near. Because the worst scenario, and I have been twice this last summer, it has happened, that you're helping people, they're talking, I didn't pay attention to where they set it down. And as I'm standing there watching them put it back together, they're walking over and all of a sudden you hear crunch. And I'm hoping that big crunch was just the plastic. And it's never that hope. It's usually then a squished up queen. And it's like, okay, now we have a real big problem. Make sure you put her on the side in the shade until you're done. Once she's marked, put everything back together. Put the frames back in and then pick it up. Remember, you still have her a little bit walking around. Take the plunger out and let her go back next to the frame you took her off of. Because the young that are there already know her. She'll just jump right in there, run right down. They're not going to skip a beat. Right? Does that make sense? You'll find that this is so easy to do. And again, doesn't matter what color. When this one messes up, I go by, I think it's Walmart in the craft section. They're $1.97 instead of what is the $8.99 at the bee supply things. And again, doesn't matter. One year I marked them in sparkly nail polish.
So I don't want to step you back too far, but we have an internet question.
Sure.
See, live stream is fun like that. If you are constantly running drone frame, how does that affect the queen ability to lay workers?
Because you are running 2 deeps and you have got 2 frames, and that's not going to over drone the population. It's not significant. If you make a drone hive, that's a whole different story. Right. And that's a different talk. Okay, so also what you're going to get, small hive beetles. You guys, how many people in here have small hive beetles? How many people have no small hive beetles? If you see me afterwards, Roy, I'll tell you where to hook up with some. There are some people, it's insane, the small hive beetle problem they have. There's 3 things in your kit that you're going to get. The first is the easiest, the least work involved. It's microfiber material. And what you're going to do with this is you're going to put it up on the top. Can I borrow her hive?
Sure, she won't mind.
No, and the bees probably won't even know this. You're going to put it.
I'm sure those bees won't notice.
Corner, underneath the inner cover, because if you notice when they run the small hive beetles up, it's always up to the top of the frames and usually in the corner. So when you pop that inner cover off, they're scurrying. Put these up in the top corner. What happens is the bees can walk over them and they don't get stuck. The feet and the antennae on the small hive beetle are small enough, they get caught up in the fiber. So that the only other thing you would want to bring to the bee yard with you would maybe be a small container of soapy water. So that when you pull these out and it's got little small hive beetles stuck to it, throw it in the container of soapy water. Dawn dishwashing liquid is really good for killing bugs. All right, now we're back on the other side. No, actually, we should stay here. The next one that we have is, this is the disposable one. So what you can do with this is you are just going to fit this right between the frames, just like that. All right. The downside to this one is that they are going to propolize along the edges. So when you go to take it out, you have to be real careful that it doesn't tear it. Okay, does that make sense? For this one also, you are going to fill it halfway with, like, I use Crisco oil and apple cider vinegar. The apple cider vinegar is an attractant to them. So you're going to fill it halfway. When they chase the beetles, they have little holes in this. They're going to jump in the holes, and of course they don't swim well, so they're going to drown. The downside, though, is that when you are taking this hive apart and say this super you really aren't going to look in, make sure that when you lift this super up, you set it down flat. I'm one of these people that I lift it up, and if I'm not going to use it, I tip it up on its side this way. Well, when you do that, what did you just dump out? Not only wet bees die fast, Crisco bees die faster. Third one that you get is one with a bait trap in it. And this actually opens up and you put your bait in this little compartment in here.
So you put your bait in, and it's like it's in the manual of the recipe. It's got like rotted banana and some other disgusting things, but they're very attractant to the little small hive beetle. The 2 compartments on the side, you are then going to fill again with the Crisco oil and the apple cider vinegar. Snap the top back on. And the clever thing with this one, see the little wings on the side? That's going to fit right on the side, and it hooks to the frame next to it. So that if you separate one frame, you don't have to worry about it falling in, or that you didn't separate it well and it's going to get pulled over. It actually will hang there by itself. But again, don't do like I do and tip it over, because this stuff will still run out. This one you can dump out and refill. I know people have dumped this out and refilled it. It's a little bit of a challenge. Those are some small holes. If your club buys these in bulk, I think Brushy Mountain, you can buy a case of them, and they come out to like $1.25 a piece.
Yeah, some of them are even less than that.
Yeah, so buy them in bulk and then just have them at one of your field days.
For sure.
All right, so there's your small hive beetles. Go ahead.
So I hear a lot about what Varroa does. What specifically do the small hive beetles do?
Oh, when we get to that part in the talk, it's disgusting. They'll slime your hive.
Way worse.
Yeah, it's like, oh. Yeah, I have some really bad stories for that one. I'll give you nightmares tonight. This is one of those, like a erasable marker kind of thing, so that you can write in your book, and then you can just take your thumb at the end of it and wipe it all off. So these have been laminated, so they're reusable. You also get a pair of long tweezers. And when we get to the foul brood, European and American, this is a whole lot better to use if you find something suspicious in the hive. This is a lot easier to disinfect than a hive tool, right? Our first, instinct is to take the hive tool and kind of dig around in something, but now you've just contaminated an inch piece of metal, correct? What do you usually do with it then? Either wipe it on your pant leg or stick it in your back pocket. Okay, so now you contaminated your leg and your back pocket. So then you get in the truck to go home, so now you can contaminate the seat of your truck. You get to the house, and it goes on and on and on. This is a whole lot easier to disinfect. You can pour a cap full of alcohol, sit it in that, let it sit while you're packing up for the day. All right, so any questions? What comes in your bucket? Okay, let me find where I put my clicker.
I'm gonna say to disinfect my hive tool, traditionally what I'll do is I'll actually open the smoker, put it at the end of the smoker, and blow the smoker to full flame.
Right.
So fire sterilizes.
Exactly. Okay, did you guys hear that? So you want to, especially if you have multiple hives, you always want to keep disinfecting. Cleanliness, it's always very important. All right, good to get this back closed up. Okay, so we talked about how to do the sugar roll. And we talked about all the stuff that comes in your kit. Some of the stuff you've got automatically as soon as you walk out there. You've got your eyes, you've got your ears, you've got your nose, use them. When you walk into your bee yard, if there's a large hum going on, a big buzz, you better look up. They're probably swarming or orientating, or if it's about 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, all the drones are coming home. As far as your eyes, we talked about looking at that front for nosema splatter, pollen. Pay attention when you first walk up there, see what you've got. This time of the year, the skunks are out for mating. They're going to be by the hives to visit, looking for all the dead bees that have been tossed out. Look for the little paw prints either on the front of the hive or little tracks around the hive. Gene's from out your way, isn't he? Gene McCune? Gene McCune? That's Gene right there. I would take that out. So for some reason in my bee yard, propolis gets on everything.
I got kicked out of using the good camera. I had to go get one of those little cheap $19 ones because someone got propolis on the good camera. So, you know, get something that is cleanable. Always take a notebook and pen extra, maybe leave it in the truck. Use your manual to track those two hives, though. Look for patterns. It'll help you to be a little bit more diagnostic. We talked about everything that comes in the bucket. The only thing we talk about is you need a rubber band too. I don't use one. They're going to tell you to put the rubber band on top of the sugar jar when you're rolling it. Just don't roll it crazy. I mean, and I think that's it. So that's what comes in. So when you go, before you open, again, what you're going to look at is what's the activity at the front. Use your eyes. Anything going on downstairs? Look around. Do you smell anything? For all the new people, doesn't that hive smell really good when you first go in? It's like nice and fresh and smells kind of waxy and honey-y. That's what you always want to smell.
Unless it's a goldenrod flow.
That's what I was just going to say. Unless it's fall and you walk out and it's like, oh my gosh, something died out here. No, it's just goldenrod. It'll be real yummy in about 4 weeks. Again, when you're writing down, counting 1 and 2, pick 2 of them. Do you see eggs? Do you see larvae? Do you see brood? Does the pattern look okay? Queen cells. Hopefully you don't have any. Some of the darker bees like to make queen cups. Learn to know what the difference is. Is there fresh nectar? Is there new pollen coming in? Do you have any capped honey left? I always mark down what the temperature that day is when you're out there checking them. Mainly because you're going to find a pattern too, that if you're always going out and it's like 60 degrees and the girls are cranky, and maybe don't do it at 60 then. If you go out and it's like 75 and they're in a good mood, maybe more so 75. I know that sounds kind of silly, but you'd be surprised how many even seasoned beekeepers, oh, every time I go out, they're really in a bad mood. Well, you keep going out at 8 o'clock in the morning and it's like 45 degrees.
Don't be afraid to check the barometer either. I've noticed that actually matters more.
The
it seems to anyway.
Barometric pressure, they'll let you know. After you open, as soon as you pop that lid off, smell. This is Gym 2, John Grafton. This was a hive at the OSBA, at the Wooster OARDC bee lab. When they popped the lid, everybody, those of us that knew what was going on was like, okay, we're not going to get too much closer, and we were all backed up. Here there was foul brood. Now you understand that this is a teaching lab. They do a lot of research there, so it's okay that they're growing some of this stuff, but how hard is it going to be to disinfect that? Whereas Dr. 2, what does he have? If he's pulling samples with a tweezer, all right, remember we just talked about that? It's a whole lot easier to disinfect. Again, after you open the hive, we just talked about, mark all these things down. You want eggs, larvae, and brood. One of the things we're going to talk about too is that 4-2-1, that 4 parts cap brood, 2 parts larva, 1 part eggs. Always, always. That's probably maybe one of the few things that has been consistent throughout my beekeeping years. And then if not, why not? And that usually will help you pinpoint a problem going on in the hive that maybe you haven't recognized. Environmental stresses are going to cause a lot of your problems. This, you guys probably think is just an everyday occurrence. Maybe not so much here. There was a hive here. This is a picture of my friend's yard. When he put the hives over here, it was like so picturesque and really nice, and he thought this was a great place to put his bees until the spring thaw. And now you don't even see, I don't even think I think they kind of got washed around and then down through the creek. But pay attention ahead of time of where you put them, because that's what's going to cause some of your problems. Chalk brood actually does look like little pieces of chalk. It's usually a spring disease, and I think that is where that comes from. Because if you start to give your hive pollen too early, and they start brooding up, and you get a cold snap, the bees are going to cluster back closer to that queen, right? She's more important. So what gets left behind? That edge brood. So then you're going to pick up either chalk brood, European foul brood. Anytime you have spores, it can be an issue. So that's why too, we keep saying, change out your combs. Don't leave them in too many years. Again, a lot of times chalk brood is a springtime problem because it's from chilling. Keep your hives ventilated. And this is real important too, that the nurse bees will help regulate that temperature. But how do you get your nurse bees? You got to get the brood to hatch, right? So you want to make sure that you don't brood up too early. How many people have ever had like gummy worms, gummy bears? Darn. All right, if you have grandkids, next time they have one, just take one and chew on it a little bit. It's like a rubber band, and that's what that is. It's just the same consistency of a gummy bear. Probably maybe not chew on that. It's not very tasty. But I'm just giving you that mental thought about it so that when you see this in your hive, you're going to know right away, oh yeah, don't chew on that. It's going to be like gum. That is what it looks like. It's very disgusting. You guys can read how that goes.
That characteristic
Whoops.
tail's hard to miss.
Oh yeah. And that's what it looks like when they pull the caps off it. So you can take your tweezers and pull that right out. And if you squeeze it with the tweezers, it's rubbery. If you take it out and squeeze it with your fingers, it's rubbery. Well, no, we already said don't chew on it. Wash your fingers there when you're done. Again, spores. I'm going to fill all these in. Big problem. Now that we had, starting last January, not in January 2017, from now on you have to get a prescription from your veterinarian for antibiotics. They are going to push you. They are not going to be very cooperative about it because their license is on the line. Okay? So the best thing to do is we just need to get rid of it rather than trying to use antibiotics to control it. It doesn't get rid of it, it only controls it. The main thing with American foul brood, notice the color of it. Looks like coffee. This one I want you to remember is not as deadly, but it looks like a really bad sinus infection. Hence the word snotty. It's a snotty one. The smell is horrible. A friend of mine, one of my mentors, when I first started out, he could walk on somebody's property, just get out of his vehicle and he could smell it. If you have a real good sense of smell, it smells horrible. It smells like a nasty old chicken coop. On this one, on the European, sometimes there isn't a smell. The European you're going to find on the lower parts of the brood nest, normally. On American foul brood, normally it's in the center. You're also going to find scale. See this here? This is where the larva has melted down, and it actually just hardens off like that. You can look at it, I'm going to scoot across here. When you take the frame out of the hive and you tip it this way and look down into it, you're going to see the scale. It's going to be dry and hard. If you take your tweezers
and try and, it won't even hardly chip out. That's how it's like glued in there, all right? So it's a definite, and again, there's an odor. If you are suspicious of it, first call your inspector, your local inspector. Have them come out and look at it, and of course, you don't want to be touching things or spreading anything around. Then you're gonna go sample and send it to Beltsville. Make sure that you do not put it in plastic. It needs to be wrapped in newspaper twice, and then wrapped in maybe like a corrugated cardboard or something to kind of cushion it a little bit, and then send it off to them, and make sure you call them ahead of time and tell them that it's coming. Let me think what else. A lot of times how this is getting spread, well, Grandpa had some old equipment and all his bees died out, and it just, you don't smell that bad, but they've been in the barn for 20 years, so they gotta be good. Anybody that's got a biology background understands that nothing kills spores except extremely high heat, and that didn't take out the barn. So if you look here on the American foul brood, only a few spores are needed to kill one larva.
That's not great. I read years ago, 50,000 spores per cubic centimeter of honey, which is not very much.
Right.
Not just 1 or 2 spores.
Well, to kill one larva.
No.
Well, they feed, okay, well, that's what I think Tim Arhide did this one.
He is correct on that. It's got to get over a minimum infection amount, and that's not a few spores. It's actually quite a few.
Okay. Well, okay, so 1 million spores?
Every 50,000, what I read years ago, how the USDA said that honey, it's transported in the honey. I
Correct.
understand that.
That's where, well, because it all gets moved around, and it gets fed and then stored.
It's transmitted by robbing, and the bees are robbing the honey.
Correct.
And it said that the minimum that you needed, the minimum number of spores, and they were going to metric cubic centimeters of honey was 50,000 spores, which is not very much.
No.
That's not just 1 or 2 spores.
So if a hive is robbed out, when your hive gets robbed out, they don't take a couple inches of honey. They take frames of honey.
Absolutely.
And so you are like millions of spores over. But yes.
Is there a fee for calling your inspector or something?
No, there is no fee to call your bee inspector, your local inspector, and there is no fee when you send your sample to Beltsville for that either. All right, so do that. Again, the main thing, if you notice on both of these, is robbing. So you want to make sure you maintain strong, healthy hives so they don't get robbed out. Again, like Roy said, it's contaminated food for both of them that gets spread. One of the big problems that we are going to find that as beekeepers, in the past, we used to be able to get a prescription, or we used to be able to buy the antibiotic just outright. And now you have to get the prescription from the veterinarian. There's going to be, like I said, pushback from that because they are really having some trouble wrapping their heads around this American foul brood thing. They do know that it's highly contagious. They do know that it's deadly. It will kill the hive. Where the problem comes is that if, say, your hive has foul brood, you get the prescription from your veterinarian, so it is controlling the foul brood. You go on vacation. He's gone for 3 weeks. They miss one of the dustings. The hive weakens down a little bit. Your hive's flying by. 2 or 3 of them fly by. Whoa, look at all this honey. Nobody's really watching it that close, and they go in and rob it out. So you have a few hives that have picked it up. Within a week or 2, yours start dwindling a little bit. So Dan's hives are flying by. Within a 3-week period, you can infect how many hives? Do you think the veterinarian is going to want to write a prescription again if he can be sued because all these guys now have foul brood because of a prescription that he wrote to control something? Last February, when I was down at the veterinarian conference, they're having some trouble with that.
Dr. Chris Cripps from Betterby was down there to explain everything. You know, he did a great job, but to tell a regular veterinarian, will you come out and look at a hive that's got 40, 50, 60,000 bees in it? They're not going to want to come out. So again, we have to think of a better way to control this rather than trying to get an antibiotic. So the best course, and I firmly believe this, is burn it. Anybody in here live in the city? Okay, you guys have a unique problem. If your hive comes down with American foul brood, you probably, once it's diagnosed and confirmed, you really can't burn it in the city. So what you're going to have to do is you are going to have to dispatch the bees, bucket of water with soap in it, kill them all, bag everything up, and then find someone out in the country that can dig a pit and then burn it. The reason they want to dig a pit is that when everything gets burnt, sometimes all the honey doesn't get burned up. So this way that when everything is burnt, it can be covered over, and then your bees flying over again aren't going to stop in and pick up contaminated honey. All right? Does that make sense? Does that sound good? Yeah.
Are you also burying it because not all the spores are going to die in just flames?
Again, because of the honey. Again, so if you are digging it, the pit has to be deep enough also if you're in the country that when the farmer goes through, it doesn't get dug back up.
I might be so bold, a better solution for just a small beekeeper is to just double bag it. A lot easier. Save all that hassle. Because all that stuff at the trash is all covered over at night. They can't leave, the dump does not leave stuff uncovered at night.
The issue there was I do believe that is a felony because that is considered a hazmat.
Problem is, you don't know how to burn it right. You're going to get into the problem that I have burned hundreds of hives of foul brood.
I understand that completely, but it's a legality issue.
And it's a catch-22. So if you have foul brood, first get it diagnosed. Second, talk to a seasoned beekeeper. I always tell them, dig a deep pit, burn the snot out of it, and then if there is anything left, whatever charred remains, cover it over. So, oh yeah, I mean, when we burn, it's the fire department comes out. But anyway, controlled burning, the big thing is that you need to get rid of it. If you come up with foul brood and you take the hit for the equipment, if you call me, I will help you get bees. That is how strongly I feel about burn it. Don't try to limp it along. The only problem I have about putting it at the dump, I know that even double bagging it, I've been at my dump out in Medina County, and there's a lot of critters that roam through there. If they tear it open, I don't want my bees within.
You can have a whole bee yard, let's say 15 counties, and a county will come down with foul brood. And it'll get robbed out, and not all 15 will get foul brood.
That's true. I understand, but we want to err on the careful side.
Being paranoid.
Okay, I like that though. Yes. Burn them. You're gonna burn it up hot enough. Well.
You do if you get foul brood.
With foul brood. All right. Well, we're getting off the point. But anyway, before you burn, no matter where you are, call your fire department. Because if you are burning the plastic, it's going to be black smoke and they get a little paranoid. But again, if you are doing just wax is very volatile. Just make sure you're back far enough too. A lot of times too, that when we have to go out to assist in these things, we bring a leaf blower. It accelerates it and it really cranks up the heat. But let the proper authorities know. Okay, here we go, no Zima. There were 2 of them. Mostly now, we don't really see Apis anymore. That one's pretty much gone. And Serrane, we really don't visually see, but that's the one that Be Informed Partnership is thinking that is the culprit for the summer kills. Those are the ones that you have a hive that just never really kind of builds up, kind of struggles. Doesn't matter if you give it extra brood, doesn't matter if you feed it, doesn't matter if you give it extra pollen, it just struggles along. If you can have access to a microscope, you can do a bee squish and look under the microscope. It's going to be an ovular shape at about 200. Set your scope for 200 and it'll show up. And that's something a little bit easier, but it's important to be able to recognize it. And like I said, this one we really don't even see anymore. This is what it used to look like. It was really nasty, stinky splatter on the inside. That's what that was. But surrounding, again, like I said, you need a microscope. And Be Informed Partnership believes that's what it is. So again, if you could send in samples to Beltsville. They don't charge for samples. I know if you send them in to Be Informed Partnership, they have a hefty fee schedule. So I would send it to Beltsville first where it's cheap, or well, where there's no fee. This is probably one of the biggest problems that we have, especially as a new beekeeper. It's a bigger problem than what they tell you in class. Again, that's what it looks like. It's very evident. I showed you a couple ways. You can do a powdered sugar roll and count them that way. You can fork them off of the side of a drone frame, or even if you have a regular frame, you know, and they build it along the peripheral, fork them off of that. You can do an alcohol wash. The main thing here is if you have mites, you have to do something. Whether you are a chemical-free person, or you use soft chemicals, or you use hard chemicals, you have to do something. And down here, this has to be updated. It's up to 24 diseases now. And now they're also saying that we used to think that they fed off the hemolymph, and now they're saying, no, it's more of the fat bodies. And the fat body in the bee would be the equivalent of our liver. You can't live without your liver. And that might be why we're having such a struggle on getting a better handle on the mite issue. A lot of times this is where people go, oh gosh, I have a problem. Well, here's 1, 2, 3. If you see this, you're past having a problem. This hive is probably pretty much a dead hive. Again, we talked about the mite board. And if you put a medium in a deep one, this is just natural. So you don't have to spend the money to get a green plastic one. You can just use a honey super frame in a deep box. Same thing. This you can cut off. You can squish it, throw it in the wax melt or whatever you want. Feed it to the chickens. We have purple martins on our property, and they get in the habit, they know every Sunday afternoon there's going to be frames coming out, and I can lean them against the side of the garden fence, and they come out and they've got those really long pointy bills. They don't tear up the wax hardly at all. And they'll pick it clean and I can put it right back then without much mess. But again, at least do the alcohol wash so you get a true mite count. Does everybody understand that part? You think you'd be comfortable with that? I know killing 300 is going to be tough, but you can do it once in a while.
How many eggs have they by cleaners take?
But see, that's, it's well.
How many other bees die off naturally?
Just bird strikes.
Exactly, just by the, by the martins flying by, how many get picked up. Again, that's
my biggest fear is washing the queen.
Yeah, that doesn't go well either. But if you mark her with a bright color, doesn't matter what the color is for that year.
Find her, then I wouldn't have to worry about washing.
Good point. Good point. Well, the more you're in there, the more you get used to finding her. It gets easier, believe it or not. It does. So the drone cone we talked about, you can also get them in deep size. And your kit comes with the medium. This we all talked about. The big thing here, I can't believe a lot of people will yank them right out of the freezer and put them in the hive. What do you think you're doing to the frame? You're putting it one frame from the cluster, right? So don't you think you just froze that one side of the cluster? Yeah, make sure you let it defrost for 24 hours before you put it back in there. Again, once you decide what your threshold is, mine is 1. That's what when I find 1 mite, I do something right then. I don't wait till it gets to 2 or 3 or 4. 1 is mine. Whatever your load level you decide it is, you have to do something, whether it's the oxalic vaporizing and oxalic dribble. Anybody try that yet? I've heard really good results over that. The dribble, pretty much above 40 degrees. Vaporizing, you can zap them anytime.
Yep.
It's crazy. And like this time of the year when there's like no brood or very little brood, you should be up to a couple inches brown by now. But November, December, really good time to vaporize them. But do something. Sticky board. Everybody has, how many people have screen bottom boards in here? Pretty much, well, about half and half. Okay. And you get that little white slide out board. You can use that as your sticky board. Spray it with some Pam. I go out once a week when I'm pulling boards and stuff. Pull it out, look at it. You have to remember it's supposed to be a 24-hour drop. We should fill that part in, huh? Supposed to be a 24-hour drop. So if you're only out there checking them once a week, so if you know you put that board in on Sunday, you pull it out the next Sunday and you count how many mites are on there, then divide it by 7, gives you a 24-hour drop. Okay? Again, if you get them over your threshold, you have to do something. If you don't have those little whiteboards right after elections, go pick up the losers. They won't mind. And again, keep your can of your spray can of Spam or Pam in your bucket, because again, if you use it out in the bee yard and then bring it back in, you're going to get caught because there'll be propolis on it, and they'll know you used the kitchen Pam again. So go by Mark's. It's like $2. Put it in the bucket.
Strangely, I think I could probably get away with that.
It's the only thing in their house that's propolis on it.
Everything has propolis. Okay, we talked about, this is a little misleading because it says shake. Why don't you want to shake?
They'll vomit.
They'll throw up. Makes it sticky. You won't get a true count. Once a month, you should do a sugar roll or an alcohol wash. Again, how many are they laying? In the summer, it's 15 to 2,000 eggs a day. It's okay if you alcohol 300 of them. If you're really upset about killing the bees, powdered sugar. You can powder sugar a queen. And she's not real happy.
Actually, some bees die being powdered sugar too, I understand.
Well, if you're shaking them. Or, I've never killed anybody.
Give me the alcohol anyway.
Yeah. So anyway, at least, you got to do an alcohol wash. Absolutely, in my opinion, in July. Because a lot of times they used to tell us to wait till August. If you've got a high count in August, you're already passed over the top of that bubble. Try to be proactive. It's easier on the hive. They have said that full sun helps. Summer splits is the same as swarming, kind of, sort of. On the last one, read the label. More importantly, follow the label. More is never better. It doesn't help when you're treating. This is that real cute little small hive beetle. And Roy, we could get you some.
I've seen it.
Yeah, mine.
I just haven't seen it in the last couple of years.
Oh, you are lucky. There's a bee yard that I stop by to help out, and every week he's dumping 15, 20 out of that trap. Every week.
That truck said, what's more like you?
Yeah.
What did he say?
That's no big deal.
He said if he sees one or two, no problem. If
Right.
he sees more than one or two, go down in the hive and take a look because there's something wrong with the hive.
Yeah.
Hive is probably not up to snuff.
Again,
And he's
right.
156 miles south of us, and that is probably extremely good advice.
Right. And
You've got
again,
a whole slew of them. The problem is probably more yours. I mean,
Is the beekeeper.
The hive is an ideal environment for whatever reason.
exactly. And a lot of times like this, the yard I was talking about, partially shaded. They don't get sun till almost noon. Again, if you give them a leg up, they're gonna take it. The hive will get a little bit weaker. This is the small hive beetle larva. It's about the same size as a fly maggot. All right? And you can see where I'm gonna go with this conversation now.
The only possible upside I can give you is they make really good fishing bait.
Yeah, but they're really hard to string on the hook. Had a gentleman call last year up in Cleveland. He wanted to know, what do you do for flies in your hive? And I'm like, what? How can you have flies in your hive? Why do you think you have flies in the hive? He hadn't been in them all summer, the hives. Number one problem. Number two, when he told me, he goes, well, I haven't really seen any flies, but there's all kinds of maggots coming out the front, and it's real stinky and gooey.
And you're done.
Again, the last one. They go in there, they defecate in the honey, it ferments, it slimes out, it's disgusting. You don't want them to get that far. Get rid of them before, again, try and be proactive. They used to tell us that we aren't going to have a problem up here because we have clay soil. Where are your hives? Are they close to the garden? Are they close to the fruit trees? Are they close to the lawn? All these are cultivated soils. It's perfect. These little suckers the larva will climb a good 15, 20 feet to pupate. So that's kind of.
You know, another thing, tell people is don't take packages with roots coming out for it. Don't do it.
Yeah. Well, we're going to get to that part too. Do we have any package people in here?
Since I overwinter all my bees in Florida.
Well, we'll talk to you later. But that's true. Caused a lot of uproar with, I think it was 2 Januaries ago. I helped co-write an article for ABJ about varroa and small hive beetle, and one of the parts in it was, why can't, when they shake these packages in Florida and Georgia, and they're measuring out the 3 pounds, why can't they squirt in the oxalic acid, then add the can of sugar syrup, hang the queen? By the time we get these bees up here, 3 to 5 days, are we going to have any mites left? No. And it's going to get rid of the small hive beetles. It'll cost them almost a half a penny per package to treat them down there. Would you not pay $5 more a package if you're getting no small hive beetles and no varroa?
No way, it'd be half a penny to 10.
So tell them where to get there.
I can't do that right now. After we come off the YouTube thing. I know, set me up. Oh, darn, went too far. That's what they look like. Aren't they cute? Little disgusting little stinkers. The darker the bee, we'll corral them up in the corner and propolize them. They'll make them actually like a little corral. It's kind of cute.
Herding.
Yeah, they herd them up there, put them in a corner. Except then when, of course, you mess up and you open the lid up and then they all jump over the edge and run. I can imagine what the bees have to say about that. But again, if you keep them in full sun, it helps. Normally, these guys in wax moths and stuff, the reason you get them, there's a problem with the hive. It's not at capacity. The queen isn't cranking as well as she should be. There's something off in the hive. So if you have a pest, you need to correct the problem, not the symptom. That makes sense? You have these small head beetles and the wax moths, those are your symptoms. The problem is something going on in the hive. So we talked about the little beetle jail, we talked about the trap, we talked about the microfiber. Down in West Virginia, they take quilt batting, the real fine one, and they'll pull some apart and they'll put a little piece of pollen patty in it and then pull it back together and stick it on the top bars. Again, the small hive beetles are attracted to the pollen patty. They get stuck in the fiber and the bees just walk right over it. It's kind of really disgusting, worse than those little fibers. So you want to have a little bucket of Dawn soapy water. I will advocate for the Dawn. And then dump it in there, so when you get done, you get rid of those. That's what it looks like. I mean, it is a slimy, stinky mess, bless you. And they're about the size of like a garbage maggot, a fly maggot. And the smell, you'll know it when you get there, before you even crank it over. But don't let it get that far. This is one of my favorite little traps for during the day. Did you guys get European hornets up here yet? Okay, yeah, same down by us. The yellow jackets and the Europeans, we're finding them now coming off the wood pile. They overwinter in there. You'll find the queens, big suckers.
Europeans are native to here. The European hornet's actually native to Ohio.
We didn't have any down by us.
For sure you did.
2 years ago.
For sure you did.
Well, then they didn't find the hives then.
You might have Asian hornets now. Those are moving up. That's a whole different problem.
Well,
and please tell me you don't.
No.
Because I haven't seen any of those.
But anyway, so wax moths again is when they get weak, there's not enough to defend it. You gave them too much room. Problems that way. I think you should use entrance reducers. There's some people that say no, leave them off. And where I'm at, there's too many other critters that take advantage. You can make a real simple little trap this way with a 2-liter bottle, cut the top off it. The bottom part is about 2 inches of sugar water with a stinky piece of protein. My favorite one is Cleveland bologna. It's got a lot of garlic and it's smell to it. Spam would work. And you just put a small bit of that in there, and then you put the top of it inverted back on. And then the yellow jackets, they go for the protein. Same thing with the hornets. If at night you put this under a light, we usually then move them over by the barns at night, it'll catch the wax moths. It's kind of dual purpose. And then you just, when they get real full, you dump out 3/4 of it, fill it up with some water, and just the stench of all those decaying bodies is a real nice attractant to the next group. If you put these things out in March by me, so probably end of March by you, get the queens coming out of hibernation. They're looking for protein desperately. If you can knock them out ahead of time, you'll have less problem later. Normally also on yellow jackets, if you do find them feeding at your hives, throw some powdered sugar on them and see where they go, and just kind of look for that area. Within 25 to 50 feet, you will find their nest. Pretty much guaranteed. It's amazing. So when you have nothing to do this summer and spring coming, try that. You'll be surprised. I have a very unusual brother that's his hobby, is to do these strange data things. And unfortunately, this is one of mine. We had pulled the queen and sold her, and I was going to get back to it and break it down and put another queen in and reset it. And life happened and didn't get to, and this is what happened within 3 weeks. Wax moths actually chew up the wood. This is what I scraped off of this, and this is what the frames look like. I just scraped everything out. I reused, but I burned everything else. They will make a mess. And again, this is the symptom. And the cause of this is because I pulled the queen. And of course, they couldn't requeen themselves before the wax moths moved in, and this was in probably the end of July when I pulled the queen. So too warm, too much food left in there, too much of an opportunity. We talked about marking the queen. This is the queen cage, the marking tube that I have. It's a softer, like more of like a netting that goes over her. And again, you don't see, notice I don't have her legs like splashed out. She's not splayed. Don't hurt the queen when you're doing this. And if you get a couple workers in there, it doesn't matter. And again, once you release that tube so she can walk around in there and dry, let her dry before you put her back in the hive. Because if you release her right back in, her little entourage, you know, that 12 or 13 or 4 or so bees that are in her little circle of friends, they will lick the paint right off her. So let her dry before she goes back in. Again, it makes her easier to locate so you don't wash her. You'll know if you go back in there and the queen that you find doesn't have a mark, something happened. If you have to track age, like if you're one of those people that you want to requeen every 2 or 3 years, okay, then maybe color is important. But in the beginning, just learn to mark her and find her. When you're looking at frames, learn to read your frames. Would this be a laying worker or a new queen? Which one?
That's a new queen.
Right. A lot of times people will say, oh no, that's a laying worker, there's multiple cells.
Hit the bottom.
A laying worker, that's a regular worker bee, right? She's got a short abdomen, so the eggs are going to be stuck on the sides. Sometimes on a new queen, yep, she's laying eggs good, but she doesn't quite have that thought yet, oh, you only want one per cell. Oh, that's how this goes. So if you are monitoring on your sheet and you know you had a queen cell that emerged, and this falls in the time frame of her being hardened off and mating and starting to lay, you know that's just a new queen. And then you need to go find her. So you got to learn to read them. This is probably a hive tool accident. Somebody got zapped or washed. This is a perfect frame, right? You got the capped honey, your crown of nectar pollen. You're going to have larvae here, cap brood, and there's going to be eggs around the edges. So you're going to have your one part eggs, 2 parts larva, 4 parts cap brood. If not, why not? If you have all that cap brood and no eggs, but you have larvae, what happened? What happened? If you don't have any eggs, you don't have a queen. If you have eggs and no larva, what happened? You had a supersedure, or somehow they requeen themselves because you've got that cap there, right? And then, of course, if you have eggs and larvae and no cap brood, you're just back on the upswing, right? You got a new queen cranking again, and she just hasn't been busy for how many days? A couple weeks. So again, if you're keeping track of this 421 and one of them's off, you can go back and look in your records and see when this happened. We already talked about this one, talked about that one. This one, because of the foul brood, they took a chop out of this and sent it in. This is what you want when you open it up. Not quite yet. A couple more weeks. All right, but you want to learn to recognize what the problem is. All right, be proactive. It's easier to fix something before it gets to be a major problem, right? Rather than being reactive. Like I said earlier, new people, and they have it for, if you took a class in 2016, 17, or this spring, take a class, register your $5, send your $5 to Department of Agriculture to register your apiary. Buy your bees, buy your equipment, go online, they'll send you a box with all the stuff in it. All right? So, questions? No questions?
There's no way that nobody here doesn't have a question.
You can
Don't be
ask me.
shy.
He can turn this off. Okay. Yes, sir.
I think it's that.
Which class in Jefferson? You probably have to ask me. Yeah, let me, because I'd have to go back and look. It needs to be like a 4-hour class. So.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Let me check. I'd have to ask on that one. I'd have to. Yeah, usually it needs to be like a beginner's class, but ask me afterwards. I'll get that clarified. Yes? The next, when, are you guys having a beginner class here? No? They're all over the place.
We will eventually have one in the spring.
Okay, so sometime this spring, I know Trumbull County's having one.
Well, I just did Trumbull County's yesterday.
Oh, okay. I know Medina's running 2 of them, but that's kind of far. Which one? Yes. Yeah, I would, you could check the Ohio State Beekeepers website, and that all the clubs have already sent in their classes, and they'll tell you where, when, how much, and all of those count. Right, and those are like every Wednesday in February at the Nature Center.
And it is quite the hike, but Rocky River does a very good class.
Oh, yeah. There'll be like 100 people in their beginner class. It's very awesome.
It is.
Yeah, they have a good class there. But just check around. They're all over the place. You can also go on the Ohio State Beekeepers website, and I think all of them are posted on there also. And if not, send me an email. I will, I'll find out and I'll get back to you, usually within, usually 12, 24 hours most. I'll get back to you email-wise. Yes, sir. Mine would be, the easiest is vice president at ohiostatebeekeepers.org. Or you can go on the Ohio State Beekeepers website, and it's on there. You can send it to my personal one, which I don't think I have that up, but it's P. Garnes, Garnes 001 at neo.rr.com. Okay. It's always good to bring one. All right, you guys are good then? Well, thank you for listening. And if you don't, you can always buy them also. You can buy the manual separate. The main thing is come up and look at those center pages. And even if you don't get one, and I should probably turn that off.
Yeah,
but
I can
even
do
if
that.
you don't get one, get the manual.
Night, folks.
It's got some really good stuff on it.